Well, I'm excited about kickoff coming up on Saturday, and this is kind of cool, right? Western Kentucky at Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Nick Saban Field. I mean, that kind of rolls off the tongue, right? I mean, I've never said that before, but I guess we'll get used to saying it. Welcome back, everybody, the Big Red Elephant Podcast. That's harder to say than the stadium. And Chip Patterson is our guest, and Chip is really a great writer for CBSSports.com, and I've been fortunate enough to rub elbows with him and work with him at CBS Sports HQ. He's got a great podcast, the Cover 3 podcast, and I listen to it all the time. These guys break it down, point spreads, why you need to go this direction or that direction, and he joins us now. Chip, I can only imagine how excited you are with the start of kickoff, or at least the kickoff that's already happened, but now all the big games are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing quite like that full week one. You know, just night after night after night after night. We've got the Sunday and the Monday at the end of this. I mean, it is much like, the way that you have to approach when you're doing a full championship. You got to hydrate. You got to stretch. You got to make sure you take some breaks from time to time, and just really soak it all in, because we don't get a lot of these. You know, the baseball plays 162 daggum games. You know, you go out there, 82 hockey games, 82 NBA games. You know, this is the shortest schedule of major American sports. And so, we really need to make sure that we take each Saturday and not take it for granted. So that's kind of how I approach the season.
Yeah, hallelujah, man. I'm with you on that. And you can only imagine the anticipation for the Alabama football faithful with Coach DeBoer now stalking the sidelines. All reports are great. It should be fun. And Chip, here's my take, right? I mean, it was an unprecedented run under Coach Saban, will never be matched. And I tell people all the time, enjoy that, because that was something very unique. But I do think Coach DeBoer and his new staff will bring in a better offense. I think Alabama, and people are like, what? I just think the offense that we'll see under Coach DeBoer is going to be more, is explosive the right word? It'll be different, right, Chip?
Right, and I think that for the quarterback position, this is where I've been believing that Jalen Milroe will have better offensive coaching this year than he did with the greatest of all time. You know, it doesn't quite connect, but I think if you only focus on the position of quarterback and the offensive coaching that Jalen Milroe is going to have, that's why you think that what he was able to do for Michael Penix Jr., though Michael Penix Jr. is not at all the same player that Jalen Milroe is, but that jump that Michael Penix was able to take, because Kalen DeBoer, his approach to offense, and I got to follow that Washington team during the playoff a little bit last year. His approach is not one set thing. I mean, his approach to coaching and dealing with his assistants, his approach to working with the team. This is my system. You have to join it, and you have to mold to it. He wants to take what you do well, and he wants to highlight that. So what do I think that means for Jalen Milroe? I think that he's going to say, Jalen, you've got a killer deep ball. And what I did is I coached up 3 wide receivers to go to the NFL last year. And I think that that's where everybody from a Kendrick Law, who everyone's hoping is going to take a step forward, Jeremy Bernard, who comes over from Washington and knows the system, or maybe it even is Ryan Williams. Get it ready. He's supposed to be in high school this year. We're going to hear it a million times, but I think we're going to hear it because he's going to have a whole bunch of big plays and a bunch of big catches. So let's figure out ways to accentuate your deep ball. Hey, Jalen, you are rocked up. You are strong. You are an explosive runner. Michael Penix was not that. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be excited to find ways to highlight his playmaking ability on the ground. And so I really think that this is going to be, again, a loss for Alabama football that, like you said, cannot be replicated. The exit, the retirement of Nick Saban. But there are places where the arrival of Kalen DeBoer is actually going to lead to a little bit of a step forward, and I think the offensive side of the ball is going to be that place.
And Chip, listen, up front, you get the Proctor kid, Caden Proctor. He took the respite or the vacation to Iowa, and then he came back, decided Alabama was better for him, and he's an outstanding young left tackle. And then the center, major upgrade with the kid from Washington, Parker Brailsford. So, and the other guys are really good too. The right tackle played left tackle for a while last year. I mean, you got big road graders up front. That's where it all starts, right?
Oh yeah, and the ability to run the football. I mean, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes is an awesome 1-2 punch. And when you're able to really push them around at the line of scrimmage, that's just going to make everything easier. So I've got really Alabama. We'll get into it. Alabama is not without questions. Alabama is not without spots where I think they need to have answers to my questions, or they will not be able to maximize what they can do this season. Because what they can do is compete for an SEC championship, but there are spots where when they get out there, and especially when they get out there in those toughest games, they need to be able to have answers against the best teams in the league.
Well, you know, it was interesting, Chip, at the SEC meetings several weeks back now, and Coach Saban, who I think is going to be fantastic on ESPN, but he was very outspoken and very honest about his old team, and he said his concern was the secondary. And, of course, that was his baby, lost a lot of players. Now you have these transfer kids coming in, and I assume they're going to start. Damani Jackson from USC, Deshaun Jones, Wake Forest, and the kid Keon Sapp from Michigan. I mean, they are all key players at their previous schools. But is there depth there? Is that an area of concern, Chip?
Yeah, specifically corner, because I think Keon Sabb is a terrific player, and the combination of him and Malachi Moore at safety. I mean, if there's injury, then again we get to problems because depth is something. But safety I feel good about. But at corner, I mean, you're trusting your transfers to deliver, and if they don't, then we got to go young. We got to go real young. And look, they don't make a lot of Patrick Surtains. You know, like they don't make a lot of players that can come in and right away step out there and be an impact corner in the SEC as a true freshman or as a younger player. So I think that the cornerback position is one where if your transfer evaluation was not spot on for what they can do, then we're going to have to get young. And if you have to get young, that might change the way you call your defense. That might change the way you try to apply pass rush, because that's the other piece of this. I like the way that Alabama's defense is built up the middle. You know, Deontay Lawson, captain of the defense, right there at middle linebacker, gets everybody lined up. But the dynamic edge rusher is one thing that I'm looking. I'm curious to see who steps up. So on one hand, there's all these spots where I'm like, good. But if you think about modern football, edge rusher and cornerback are two pretty big parts of your defense, and so I need to see some answers to those questions.
Yeah, you got to have them. There's no question about it. And here's my take, and I'm curious to see if you agree or disagree. Listen, Coach Saban, I mean, he ran a complicated collegiate defense, especially in the secondary, and he was on those guys all the time. And in certain games, they would get confused. The other team would bust big plays. I'm thinking of the Tennessee game a couple of years ago. I think it'll be more simplified, the defense this year. And I think that's a good thing, letting kids just play. I mean, am I wrong? Am I reading too much into it? Do I not know what I'm talking about, Chip? What?
I mean, that's up to Kane Womack. You know, like that's up to that defensive staff. And the questions that I have about the defensive staff are really more about what happens deeper into the season. And this is like a real, almost professional curiosity, because you've got multiple former head coaches that are all in that same room. You've got multiple former defensive coordinators all in that same room. You've got a lot of individuals, and this is something that I think anybody who's watching or listening can appreciate from business, because a lot of those individuals have to work together. They've got to figure out an order, and something might be they might have an order right now, but when they have to start fixing things and fixing things in a dramatic way, when they start breaking down game film and things that the work that is done during the week that is so important to what happens in terms of the preparation for Saturdays, that's my curiosity. When the schedule gets tough, when they go into those biggest games of the year, if everything's going well, I'm sure it's great. But it's college football. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. Things are likely not going to go well on some level. And so I'm curious about, I'm not doubting anyone's leadership. I just think that that's unique to have so many individuals that have been successful, that have been the biggest voice in the room, head coaches, defensive coordinators, and they're all together, and they need to have their pecking order figured out.
Wow. I mean, it is fascinating. It really is. Tell me this now. Right now it's a 31-point spread. That may change here or there. Alabama at home, Western Kentucky. Certainly the Hilltoppers don't have the personnel to even remotely come close to Alabama, but 31 points in the opening game, Chip. That's a lot, but I hear you talk about the offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I would lay it before I would take the Hilltoppers, because I'll tell you what you don't want to do is you don't want to be praying for a backdoor cover when the one thing that Kalen DeBoer knows that he needs to do is put something on the scoreboard to let everybody in Tuscaloosa breathe easy. Because there are certain spots on the schedule where I just, I look at this team has to, let's be honest, let's go ahead and get it out there. This team has to be ready when Georgia comes to town. And if you're going to be ready for that game, there ain't no warm-up. And I know that the backups are probably going to be in there, but you got to score enough to cover that spread before you can turn it over to the backups. So I expect that the idea will be to be as efficient as possible with every single possession. If they get 4 first-half possessions, and they might get 5, they're going to want to score on every single one of those possessions. When the backups get in there, they're going to want to show and compete for their spots on the depth chart. So I expect the Crimson Tide, to cover that. But I would not, I would not hold that ticket because I don't want to be having to watch when it's 28-35 to 28-35, and you're sitting there sweating it. I mean, that's how the odds makers make money. But I do expect it to be a handy Crimson Tide win.
Well, several of my friends, you were describing my friends, who stayed at the very end. Yeah. And, they're like, oh, my gosh, they got to score another touchdown. And my buddies go crazy. All right, September 14th, Alabama at Wisconsin, which is going to be an intriguing game. And Wisconsin surely is going to have a better year than they did a year ago. And I think they have good personnel. Alabama, 9.5-point favorite on the road. This is just an early take. What do you think about that trip? Because that's kind of an intriguing game.
Oh, it is. I'm not sure that Wisconsin has the personnel to be able to take advantage of what we talked about, Alabama's question marks at cornerback. I think Tyler Van Dyke had the word coming out of spring was a little bit iffy. The word in fall camp is that he has started to get a little bit closer to that form he had early in his career at Miami when he's the ACC Rookie of the Year. But the wide receiver position, I think just in terms of the players that are out there, of all the wide receiver groups that Alabama will play in 2024, Wisconsin is not the most intimidating. The things that are going to be important for Alabama in that game, and the reasons why I think they are a fair 9.5-point favorite, is just to be able to handle the environment, take the crowd out of the game. How do you do that? You run the football, you put together long drives. I just see it being a lean-on-you type game for the Crimson Tide because this Wisconsin defense, I trust Luke Fickell. I trust Luke Fickell's coaching and what he was able to do, not only as a head coach at Cincinnati, but as a coordinator at Ohio State. But I also thought that last year Wisconsin got pushed around in ways that were not familiar to what you think of with Wisconsin this year. I think that Alabama has an advantage at the line of scrimmage, and I think that that's what they lean on to handle Camp Randall, and then to be able to make sure that you keep Wisconsin at arm's distance.
All right, September 28th, you mentioned it. Here comes Kirby and the Bulldogs. Right now, early line 4.5, Georgia favored in T-Town. That's interesting.
I need to see, this is the good news for trying to project that game. We will have seen Alabama on the road, and we will have seen Georgia against Clemson. And I think that the Tigers are going to be much improved. I think that Georgia's going to win that football game. But the information that we're going to get about, last year I thought that Georgia at times could not run the football with consistency. Now you bring in Trevor Etienne from Florida. Is he the kind of player that can create those explosive plays? Carson Beck statistically is one of the best returning quarterbacks in the entire country. But he is losing a dynamic player in Brock Bowers. How does Oscar Delp step up? Do we see the rest of that wide receiving core? They get Colby Young out of Miami. Do we see Dylan Bell, kind of the Swiss Army knife? Does he start to become a factor? And then for Georgia, going back to last year's SEC championship game, I thought that Alabama's offensive line got the better of Georgia's defensive front. And Georgia's defensive front, I thought that Missouri did a good job of getting a little bit of a push on Georgia's defensive front. They got to be better because Alabama's offensive line is still awesome. And so that's information that I think we'll get from the Clemson game as well for the Bulldogs. So as I've got questions at cornerback and edge rusher for Alabama, I'm also looking to see whether Georgia has really improved because it was the first time really all last season. I mean, they won every daggum game before Atlanta. But, like,
Yeah.
in the Alabama game, I was like, after Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and just all these big interior defensive linemen that were so just game wreckers, I was like, who's that guy now? And so I think Georgia's got to answer that too. But as we're having to do our like win totals,
right?
Yeah, I've got that one as a toss-up officially with my feet held to the fire. I think I had to do something for Sportsline, a game-by-game analysis. I think I gave it to Georgia, but it is not a confident play until we get some of those questions answered for both teams.
Hey, tell me this now, and we're wrapping it up because I don't want to hold you too long because I know you're buzzing around. If you, and I tell my friends this too, if you bet on Alabama every week regardless, just take Alabama, give the points in the Georgia game, take Alabama for whatever, you're going to come out a winner at the end. Just like if you take Ohio State every week, if you take Georgia every week. I mean, agreed? I mean, you're going to come out on the end probably, with 7 more wins, 8 on the plus side, 7 or 8 times?
I don't know, because against the spread, teams like Alabama and Ohio State, I look up at the end of the year and I'm like, all right, they were 11-1 straight up. They were 6-6 against the spread. It's the public teams, and like as good as they are, the public teams and the teams that the odds makers know, like that's their goal. Their goal is to get the same amount of money on both sides. And so when you do have people that are just hammering Alabama or Ohio State, Kentucky basketball, Duke basketball, those are other ones where you just know, like, as dominant as they are on the field, when you go back, it's like, oh, they were 7-5 against the spread. Like maybe in a good year where they're ahead of the number, as I like to say, they might finish 8-4, so you end up about 3 units, something around that, once you give back the 10 cents on every dollar. So, yeah, to me, as I've said on the Cover 3 podcast, like, Bud Elliott, he can actually make you money. I always tell my friends and anybody who's talking to me, the R and ROI is for recreation. If I can move a little money around on the table, win some, lose some, ride the wave, then that's a good time when it comes to your wagering tickets. And if you're an Alabama fan and you know there's a shot that you're probably going to win some, lose some, then yeah, hammer the Tide.
All right, I'm not sure you agree with my theory.
No, I don't, because they like the best teams finish around 500 against the spread. Like there's those games where they're a 31-point favorite and they're up by 35. And the 4th string quarterback throws a pick 6.
Sure.
Nobody cares about except for the people who really care about it. They're called bad beats for a reason, Doug, because it was a winner for 59 minutes, and then one thing goes slightly wrong. But I don't hate the idea, especially right now, of taking Alabama early, because I think there is some post-Saban doubt. And that's when I use the phrase stay ahead of the number, because every single week these power ratings adjust. They adjust with the odds makers. They adjust with the sharps, with like the big organizations that put out their best bets. And so if you are bullish, then yeah, get ahead of the number, because if Alabama goes out, for example, if Alabama goes out and beats Western Kentucky 59-0, that Wisconsin line might be 10.5 instead of 9.5, and then you've gotten on the wrong side of a key number. So yeah, if you like it, go grab it. Roll Tide.
All right, I like that. I like the first game though. I do think Coach DeBoer is going to want to obviously have an impressive opener. So I think Alabama covers that. I hate 31 in the opening game, but I think at home in that scenario, I got Alabama covering too.
Yep.
So,
and that's going to be on the defense. Like that's where I was talking with Danny Cannell. We were asking him about the old 93 Seminoles defense, and he said, like, it wasn't a joke. The goal was to pitch a shutout. And look, you're not going to do that in modern football, but for that defense against Western Kentucky, hold them to 0. Like, keep them out of the end zone. Make that an easy way to be able to get a cover.
That was the old Mickey Andrews defense.
Yeah.
And Coach Bowden he wanted them, don't do anything complicated. Just stuff them because we're going to score enough to win. I mean, it was pretty simple back then with Coach Bowden and Coach Andrews.
When you've got better players and they're bigger and faster and stronger, that helps.
That helps a lot. Hey, Chip, we appreciate it. Thanks for being on. Our Alabama fans are going to listen. Again, it's the Cover 3 podcast, CBSSportsHQ.com. It's 24/7. It's free, by the way. Or you can go to CBSSports.com and read all the Chip stuff because, I mean, you basically post what? Multiple stories once the season starts, like virtually every day, right?
I mean, it is a lot. You know, at this point, Doug, like, whether it's a podcast or whether it's HQ, CBS Sports Network, a written story, hanging out with you, I'm just me. You know, it's too much for me to fake anything. This is just, I love this sport so much, and I enjoy sharing it with people.
Chip, we appreciate it, my friend. Thank you very, very much.
Sounds good, y'all.